The scene opens with a rush of heat and chaos. The sky is a deep orange as thick black smoke rises from a house consumed by flames. The camera focuses on a young black boy, no older than 12, his face strained with effort as he carries two small children, one in each arm, away from the inferno. Behind them, the house crackles, flames leaping high into the air, threatening to collapse at any moment. A woman, possibly the children's mother, runs beside them, her voice desperate but filled with relief as she calls out for the children to stay calm. The boy presses on, sweat dripping from his brow, his steps steady, never wavering despite the growing danger. In the blink of an eye, a young boy became a hero. With flames raging all around him, he carried two young children out of a house that was about to collapse, saving their lives. What he didn't know was that this act of courage would change his life forever, and the very people he saved would change his future in a way he never saw coming. Marcus had been outside playing, lost in the thrill of a game with his friends when the acrid scent of smoke filled the air. He looked up, scanning the horizon. At first, he thought it was nothing, maybe a small fire in the distance. But then he saw the smoke, dark and thick, rising from the direction of the mansion where the CEO of the local tech company, Mr. Jonathan West, lived with his family. Marcus's heart raced. The mansion was a grand, sprawling place. It wasn't just another home. It was the home of the wealthiest family in town. But to Marcus, they were just people. And he knew that behind those walls were lives that needed protecting. Without a second thought, he sprinted towards the house, his breath coming in ragged gasps as the flames grew taller, casting an eerie glow on the sky. By the time he reached the property, the fire had spread quickly. Thick black smoke poured from the windows, obscuring his view. The heat was intense, and the crackle of burning wood filled the air. Marcus's eyes widened in panic as he scanned the front of the house. He couldn't see anyone outside, but his gaze immediately fixed on an upstairs window, where he thought he saw shadows moving through the smoke. It was impossible to know for sure, but the moment he saw it, he knew what he had to do. Without hesitation, he darted up the driveway, headed straight for the front door. The front door was locked. No surprise there, given the mansion's grandiose security. But Marcus wasn't about to let that stop him. His fingers fumbled over the handle, then gripped the doorknob with determination. The door creaked open just enough for him to slip inside. And as he did, he was hit with a wall of smoke, thick and suffocating. It stung his eyes and clogged his throat, but he pushed forward, the sound of crackling fire growing louder in his ears. Upstairs, through the haze, Marcus could hear the faint sound of frightened voices. He didn't hesitate. He ran towards the stairs, adrenaline coursing through his veins, his breath short and desperate. There was no time to think. He needed to act fast. As he reached the top, he could see two figures silhouetted in a window, just beyond the billowing smoke. The children, Mr. West's children, were trapped. He didn't stop to think. Without a second glance, he bolted towards the room. The door was partially open, and he pushed it wide with all his might, his lungs burning with each breath of thick, toxic air. Inside, the two children, a boy and a girl, were huddled together on the floor, tears streaming down their faces. They looked up in shock as Marcus burst into the room. "Come on, we've got to go now." Marcus's voice was steady, but his heart pounded in his chest. There was no time for fear, no time for hesitation. He scooped both children up, one in each arm, and bolted back toward the window, where he could hear their mother shouting frantically outside, "Hold on tight!" Marcus shouted over the roar of the flames. The boy and the girl whimpered in fear but didn't struggle. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with terror. He didn't stop to explain, didn't stop to reassure them. They didn't need words right now. He had one job, to get them out alive. The window was small, but it was the only way out. Marcus lifted the children carefully, the smoke choking his lungs as he pushed them toward the opening. The fire was closing in quickly, the heat almost unbearable. But Marcus refused to let that stop him. The children screamed, frightened by the sight of the flames, but he pressed on. With the children in his arms, Marcus carefully climbed out the window and onto the roof. He looked around for the quickest escape route. The yard was below him, but it was a distance to jump. He didn't think twice. Without pausing, he jumped down, landing on the soft grass below, his knees buckling from the impact. He held the children close, not letting them go for a second as the fire raged on behind him. The mother had made it outside, her face a mix of terror and relief as she sprinted towards him. My babies, she cried, her arms outstretched. Marcus, struggling to catch his breath, handed the children to her, and she hugged them fiercely, tears streaming down her face. You saved us, she whispered, almost breathless with gratitude. Thank you. You saved them. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He was still gasping for air, his chest heaving from the effort. His heart was still racing, but the weight of what he'd done hadn't fully hit him yet. He had saved them. Against all odds, he had managed to get them out of the burning house. But the exhaustion hit him suddenly, his body trembling from the strain of it all. He looked at the family, still trying to process the overwhelming sense of relief that came from knowing they were safe. They stood there, the three of them huddled together, tears mingling with the smoke in the air. The house was now nothing but a burning shell behind them, but they were alive, and that was all that mattered. The woman turned to Marcus, her voice trembling with emotion. Thank you so much, she said, her eyes filled with gratitude. You're our hero. Marcus smiled faintly, but the words felt hollow. It's just what needed to be done, he said quietly, brushing off the compliment. The idea of being called a hero felt foreign to him, like he had just done what anyone else would have in the same situation. But he knew, deep down, that this moment would change his life forever. The fire continued to rage behind them, but Marcus wasn't focused on that anymore. He looked at the family, and for the first time in his life, he felt seen. He wasn't just the kid who lived in the neighborhood. He was someone who had made a real difference. And what he didn't know yet, but what would change everything, was that this act of bravery would lead to a fortune beyond his wildest dreams. The people he saved, people he never imagined he'd cross paths with, would soon change his future in ways he couldn't have predicted. The camera lingered on Marcus's face, the faintest flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, as he took in the magnitude of what he had just done. But there was also something else, a glimmer of hope for what was to come. The sun had barely risen the next morning when Marcus heard a knock at the door. He rubbed his eyes, unsure if he had imagined it. But when the knock came again, more urgent this time, he hurriedly got out of bed and opened the door. Standing before him was a man he recognized instantly, Jonathan Hayes, the CEO of the tech company he'd only heard about but never thought he'd meet. Marcus's heart raced as he stared up at the man. Jonathan's expression was serious, but there was something else in his eyes, gratitude, admiration. Marcus, Jonathan said, his voice full of emotion. I wanted to come here personally to thank you. You saved my children's lives yesterday. What you did was nothing short of heroic." Marcus stood there, stunned, unsure how to respond. His mother, who had been in the kitchen, came to the door, her face filled with disbelief. "I don't want anything in return, Mr. Hayes," Marcus said, shaking his head. "I just did what needed to be done. I'm glad they're safe." Jonathan took a step forward, his voice firm but kind. "I understand, but you deserve more than just my gratitude. You deserve a chance to build a better future. What you did, what you've done for my family, means more to me than you can imagine." Marcus blinked, still processing. He didn't expect anything out of this. In fact, the very idea felt uncomfortable. But Jonathan wasn't backing down. "I want to offer you a scholarship, full ride, for your education, whatever you choose to pursue," Jonathan continued, his words falling on Marcus's ears like an overwhelming wave. "And that's not all. I've arranged for your family to get a home, a steady job for your mother, and a significant amount of financial support to help you all get back on your feet. I want to invest in your future, Marcus." Marcus stood there, speechless, feeling like his entire world had just shifted. He hadn't even processed the enormity of the situation, let alone the implications of what Jonathan was offering. He couldn't grasp the magnitude of it all. "You don't need to do that," Marcus said, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. "I didn't save them for anything in return." Jonathan smiled, understanding the boy's humility. "I know you didn't, Marcus, but I want to help. You deserve the chance to live a life that's different from what you've known. You deserve a future where you don't have to struggle. You have something special in you. I see that." Marcus's heart raced, and his thoughts tumbled over one another. The offer felt like a dream. He'd never imagined anything like this would come his way, and now it seemed impossible to turn it down. But he couldn't shake the feeling that it was too much. Jonathan reached out, placing a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Take your time, but please think about it. You've earned this chance." The door closed behind Jonathan as he left, leaving Marcus and his mother standing in the doorway, stunned by what had just happened. Marcus's mind was spinning, overwhelmed by the weight of the decision before him. Later that day, Marcus found himself in a sleek, modern office building, a far cry from the life he knew. He sat in front of Jonathan Hayes, surrounded by a group of business associates, all of whom had been informed of the boy's heroic actions and the offer they were extending to him. Marcus's mother, seated beside him, was equally speechless, though the pride on her face was unmistakable. Jonathan spoke first, his voice steady and welcoming. "Marcus, we've made arrangements for your family, not just a home, but a real chance to build a future. We've got a house in a good neighborhood, a steady income for your mom, and we've worked out the details to ensure you can continue your education without worry. I want to invest in your potential, your intelligence, your future." Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. The offer was overwhelming. He had never dreamed of anything like this. He had always worked to help his mother, to take care of the family. And now, here was a chance for his family to escape the cycle of poverty, to have a future without fear of tomorrow. But Marcus hesitated, looking at his mother, who sat beside him with a proud but worried expression. She saw the uncertainty in his eyes. "You don't have to decide right now," Jonathan said, sensing the hesitation. "But I need you to know that this is more than just a charity. This is an opportunity to change the course of your life, to do things you never thought possible." Marcus looked at his mother, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if I'm not ready? What if it's too much? His mother placed her hand on his. Marcus, you've always done what was necessary, but this is a chance to do something different. For us, for you. You've already proven you're capable of greatness. Don't let fear hold you back. This isn't just about us. It's about you too. You've earned it, and we can't pass up the chance. Marcus stared down at his hands, his thoughts swirling. His mother's words resonated deep within him. She was right. This wasn't just about him. It was about their entire future, about giving them the life they deserved, the life they had only dreamed of. Okay, Marcus finally said, looking up with determination. I'll take it. I'll take the chance. Jonathan smiled, extending his hand to Marcus. That's the spirit. You won't regret this, I promise you. As Marcus shook Jonathan's hand, he felt the weight of the decision settle on his shoulders. It wasn't just about the money or the house or the education. It was about a new life, a future that he had never imagined, a future full of possibilities he could now reach for. His life had just transformed, and he was ready to embrace the journey ahead. Later that night, Marcus and his mother stood in their new home, the walls still echoing with the unfamiliarity of the space. It was more than just a house. It was a symbol of everything they had fought for, everything they had dreamed of. As they stood together, looking out over the city, Marcus realized that, for the first time in his life, he wasn't just a boy from the neighborhood. He was someone with potential, with a future, and with the chance to do more than just survive. This wasn't just a handout. This was an opportunity for change, and he was going to make the most of it. Several years passed since that fateful day when Marcus had saved Jonathan Hayes's children from the fire. The transformation in his life was nothing short of miraculous. From a young boy who had lived in the shadows of his community, uncertain of his future, Marcus had become a young adult, thriving in the very opportunities that had once seemed beyond his reach. The camera zoomed in on Marcus, now in his mid-20s, walking confidently into the modern, sleek offices of Jonathan Hayes's tech company. His professional attire spoke of his success: sharp suit, crisp tie, and a presence that demanded respect. He wasn't just an employee. He was a key player in the company, a trusted team member who had worked his way up from the bottom, determined to prove himself every step of the way. As Marcus walked into Jonathan's office, the two exchanged a warm handshake, and Jonathan offered him a proud smile. "You've come a long way, Marcus," Jonathan said, his voice filled with admiration. "I remember when you first walked through those doors, still a young boy, not knowing where life would take you. But look at you now. You've worked hard, and you've earned every bit of your success." Marcus looked at Jonathan, the man who had changed his life, and nodded. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mr. Hayes. You saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself back then." Jonathan chuckled softly. "I saw potential, Marcus. I saw a young man with a heart full of purpose. But it's your perseverance, your willingness to learn and grow, that got you here. I've watched you develop into someone who commands respect, not just because of your achievements, but because of who you are." The two of them stood there for a moment, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. Marcus had completed his education, excelled in his work, and now he held a significant role in the company, overseeing new projects that would shape the future of the business. It was a far cry from the life he had lived just a few short years ago, when he had been an unnoticed boy in his community. "I never would have imagined this," Marcus said, his voice filled with a sense of gratitude. I was just trying to survive back then. Now, I feel like I have a real purpose." Jonathan smiled, clapping him on the shoulder. "You've not only survived, Marcus, you've thrived. And the best part is, you're using your success to help others. That's what makes you stand out." Marcus felt a sense of pride swell in his chest. It wasn't just about the wealth or the status he had gained. It was about what he was able to do with that success, how he was able to make a difference in his community. A few months later, Marcus stood at a podium in front of a crowd gathered at a local community event. The room was filled with families, children, and residents from the same neighborhood Marcus had grown up in. His voice echoed through the microphone as he spoke, his words carrying a weight that resonated with everyone in the room. "5 years ago, I was just like many of you, unsure of what tomorrow would bring," Marcus began, his tone sincere and passionate. "I didn't come from privilege. I didn't have the same opportunities that others might have had. But there was one thing I always had: hope. And it was because of one simple act of courage, one decision to help others, that my life changed forever." The audience listened intently, many nodding along, feeling the depth of his words. Marcus paused for a moment, looking over the crowd, knowing that he wasn't just speaking to them. He was speaking for them. "I was given a chance when I didn't think I deserved one," he continued. "And now I want to give back. I want to make sure that the children in this neighborhood, the families who are struggling, have the same chance I did. No one should be held back because of where they were born or the color of their skin. We all deserve the chance to reach our full potential." Marcus's voice grew stronger, more confident. "That's why I've set up the Marcus Jacobs Foundation, to help underprivileged children and families get the same opportunities I was given. Education, mentorship, resources. These are the things that change lives. And I want to make sure that every child in this community knows that they have the ability to succeed, no matter where they come from." The room erupted in applause, and Marcus felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He had come so far, from the boy who had rescued 2 children from a burning house, to the man standing before an entire community, offering them the same hope that had changed his life. Later that evening, as Marcus and his mother sat together in their new home, the reality of what they had accomplished began to sink in. The home wasn't just a house. It was a symbol of everything they had worked for. And Marcus knew that this was only the beginning. He looked at his mother, who was sitting beside him, a proud smile on her face as she watched him. "We did it, Mom," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "We've really made it." His mother took his hand, her eyes shining with pride. "You've done it, Marcus. You've turned your life around. But more than that, you've turned the lives of others around. And that's something to be proud of." Marcus nodded, his heart full. He knew the journey wasn't over. There would always be more work to do, more battles to fight. But for the first time in his life, he felt like he was on the right path, a path that would not only change his future, but the future of those who came after him. He looked out the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, and for the first time, he allowed himself to feel hope, not just for himself, but for the world around him. In the final moments of the story, we see Marcus walking through his community, now a respected leader, with children and families approaching him to offer their thanks. He smiles at them, knowing that his success was never just about wealth or recognition. It was about giving back, about making sure that others had the same chance he had, an opportunity to change their lives. The camera pulls back as Marcus continues walking, his figure growing smaller in the distance, but his legacy growing larger. The music swells, leaving the audience with a sense of hope and inspiration, knowing that one act of courage can change everything. The screen fades to black, and the words appear. One act of kindness can change a life. One life can change the world. The scene fades to a vibrant community rally, where Marcus stands tall beside Jonathan, surrounded by a crowd of young people who are listening intently to his words. The energy is palpable, and the air is filled with a sense of excitement and possibility. Marcus looks out over the crowd, his gaze scanning the faces of those who are now inspired by his journey, the same journey that began with a single act of courage. Jonathan stands next to him, a proud smile on his face, his eyes filled with admiration for the young man who had become a beacon of hope for so many. As Marcus takes a moment to reflect, he looks into the camera, his voice calm but full of emotion. The fire that once threatened to consume me and the children wasn't just a disaster, Marcus says, his voice steady. It became a symbol of something bigger, a symbol of hope and change. What seemed like an end turned out to be the start of something much more powerful. He pauses, looking back at the crowd, the ripple effect of his words settling in the air. Sometimes, one act of courage can ignite a spark that changes everything. For me, it wasn't just about saving a family, it was about saving a future. The fire wasn't the end, it was just the beginning.